Hi, welcome back. So we have already discussed about the difference between storage and memory when we were discussing state variable and even the local variables. However, we'll still go through these concepts again because it becomes very important to have a clear distinction in between the storage and the memory variables, right? So as the key difference, the main difference is that the storage uh, typically holds the state variables, whereas memory holds the local variable, and we have to specify the reference type. So for example, when we are declaring a local variable, so either it can be of type memory or it can be of type call data, right? So where we already saw in that video that memory are basically mutable, whereas call data, if being passed as a params in a function, are immutable. So we need to have clear understanding of the difference in between both. Other thing is again that state variables and anything that is state variable or the storage will be permanent storage, right? So they are persistence, whereas memory, they are not persistence. Their scope is only limited to the function itself, whereas the state variables and whatever is gets stored in the storage will have like a global scope itself. The second thing is, in order to refer the storage and the memory, so it can be categorized as the storage variables or the state variables that are stored in the hard disk drive, whereas the memory, since because of its local scope, will be stored in the RAM. The main factor is that, and this is where it gets important to have like clear distinction, is that any update in a state change basically costs us money, right? So while we are using a memory storage, it won't cost us anything, but once we do any transaction in order to update state variable or even to store that, it is going to cost us money. So there has to be like a clear distinction in between that. So what I will do is I will quickly create a state variable named as, say, so it will basically be array of strings, and we'll make it public, so I don't have to create another getter for that, and maybe we'll name it as like a developers, right? So basically this array will contains names of the developers. So I will name Pushkar, maybe like Suresh, and maybe Ruchika, right? Just a second. So yeah, Ruchika. Yeah, so this is our state variable. Now what we'll do is we'll create two functions, and so one function I will name it as storage. I don't know whether I can use storage. Since it's a keyword, so I will name it as stor. So this is basically the storage functions, and I'll make it public again. And what we'll do is we'll basically declare a variable. Now this variable will be of type storage again, and a local variable. We are declaring it as a local, but we'll get to see the difference later on. So I'm declaring it as local but of type storage, and maybe I can name it as D1, that is the developer 1, where this array will simply copy whatever the state variable developer has, right? So this is the first thing, and what we'll do is that maybe the first index, that is the index 0, which is Pushkar, I will try to replace that with name, maybe say Ram, right? Now a similar function will create, but there instead of storage, like D1 declares the storage, what we'll do is we'll declare it as a memory. So let me copy this function and we'll name it as memory. Okay, I can't use the keyword memory, so I will keep it as memo, and then this goes as memory, right? Okay, I'm getting some error over here. Let me quickly check this out. So here it's basically can be strict. Okay, so now since we are updating the state variables, I just have to categorize it as view. So public and then view, right? Okay, so this is done. Now if we go ahead and if we deploy this out, and if we see, so we have like three methods now. One is basically developer, where we can go about and can access that. So at 0th index right now it is Pushkar, right? So now we have two functions. One function is basically the memory where I have declared, or I'm basically taking a copy of developers into D1 and trying to update that, right? So when I click on memo and the transaction gets executed, right? So eventually what happens is that if I try to access again the 0th index, nothing got changed, right? So still it's Pushkar. So basically it created a copy, and whatever we are updating, it is updating into that copy itself. However, the getter that we have for the developer is basically the state variable. Now what happens in case if I execute the storage function, right? So if I go ahead and if I execute this storage function, the transaction is successful, and now if I would go ahead and if I try to get what is there at the index 0, so here you see, right? So now it is updated as Ram, right? So eventually what happened is that even though we have declared it within the function, but as soon as we declared a storage of type D1 and tried to copy the state variable that we have declared for the developer, it basically took it as a reference, and whatever the update that we'll be doing here, it is basically updating the state variable itself, right? So it becomes very important. It is going to cost us as well. So it becomes very important to have a clear distinction in between when to use memory and when to use storage, and even between storage, memory and call data. So yeah, I mean this is all about the memory and storage. There's one more important topic that I want to discuss before we wrap this Solidity series, is the payable. So payable is a very important concept, and in that video we'll be doing actual transactions itself, transferring ether, which is the real stuff on the Ethereum. So let's find that out. Thank you.